to make ends meet. Keeps a man up on his feet, holding down his job, trying to show he can't be bought. Who takes every kind of people to make what life's about, yeah. Every kind of people to make the world go round. Someone's looking for a lead in his duty to a king or to a queen, protecting what he feels is right, fights against wrong with his life. There's no profit in deceit. Honest men know that revenge does not taste sweet. Whether yellow, black or white, each and every man's the same inside. Who takes every kind of people to make what life's about, yeah. It takes every kind of people to make the world go round. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. You know that love's the only goal that could bring a peace to any soul. Hey, and every man's the same. He wants the sunshine in his name. Who takes every kind of people to make what life's about, yeah. It takes every kind of people to make the world go round. Every kind of people make what life's about. One love, one heart. Let's get together and feel alright. Hear the children crying. One love. Hear the children crying. One heart. Saying, give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Saying, let's get together and feel alright. Whoa, 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 whoa. Let them all pass all their dirty remarks. One love. There is one question I'd really love to ask. One heart. Is there a place for the hopeless sinners who has hurt all mankind? Just a Savior's own belief. One love. What about a one heart? One heart. What about a let's get together and feel alright. As it was in the beginning. One love. So shall it be in the end. One heart. Alright. Thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. One more thing. Let's get together to fight this holy Armageddon. One love. So when the man comes, there will be no doom. One soul. Have pity on those whose chances grow 10. There ain't In the summertime, when the weather is hot, you can stretch right up and touch the sky. When the weather's fine, you got women on your mind. Have a drink, have a drive, go out and see what you can find. If a daddy's rich, take her out for a meal. If a daddy's poor, just do what you feel. Speed along the lane, you can turn or a turn of 25. When the sun goes down, you can make it good and live by. When I grab people, when I dirty, when I mean, we love everybody, but we do as we please. When the weather's fine, we go fishing or go sailing in the sea. We're always happy, lives we're living, yeah, that's our philosophy. Sing along with us, dee 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 dee, da 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 da, yeah, we're happy. Da da da, dee da da dee da 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 da. Yeah. Da 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 da. All right, all right, all right. Da 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 da. All right. When the winter's here, yeah, it's party time. Bring a bottle, wagon back, 'cause it'll soon be summertime. And we'll sing again. We go driving, or maybe we'll settle down. If she's rich, if she's nice, bring your friends, and we'll all go into town. In the summertime, when the weather is hot, you can stretch right up and touch the sky. When the weather's fine, you got women on your mind. Have a drink, have a drive, go out and see what you can find. If a daddy's rich, take her out for a meal. If a daddy's poor, just do what you feel. Speed along the lane, you can turn or a turn of 25. When the sun goes down, you can make it good and live by. When I grab people, when I dirty, when I mean, we love everybody, but we do as we please. When the weather's fine, we go fishing or go sailing in the sea. We're always happy, lives we're living, yeah, that's our philosophy. Sing along with us, dee 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 dee, da 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 da, yeah, we're happy. Da da da, dee da da dee da 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 da.
I'm going back.
Oh, when the sun beats down and burns the tar up on the roof, and your shoes get so hot, you wish your tired feet were fireproof. Under the boardwalk, down by the sea, yeah. On a blanket with my baby's where I'll be. Under the boardwalk, out of the sun. Under the boardwalk, we'll be having some fun. Under the boardwalk, people walking above. Under the boardwalk, we'll be making love. Under the boardwalk, boardwalk. From the park you hear the happy sounds of a carousel. You can almost taste the hot dogs and french fries they sell. Under the boardwalk, down by the sea, yeah. On a blanket with my baby, it's where I'll be. Under the boardwalk, out of the sun. Under the boardwalk, we'll be having some fun. Under the boardwalk, people walking above. Under the boardwalk, we'll be making love. Under the boardwalk, boardwalk. On a blanket with my baby, that's where I'll be. Under the boardwalk, out of the sun. Under the boardwalk, we'll be having some fun. Under the boardwalk, people walking above. Under the boardwalk, we'll be falling in love. Under the boardwalk, boardwalk. Summer in the city, back of my neck getting dirt and gritty. Bend down, isn't it a pity? Doesn't seem to be a shadow in the city. All around, people looking half dead, walking on the sidewalk harder than a match here. But at night it's a different world. Go out and find a girl. Come on and dance all night. Despite the heat, it'll be alright. And babe, don't you know it's a pity the days can't be like the nights in the summer, in the city, in the summer, in the city. Cool town, meeting in the city, dressed so fine and looking so pretty. Cool cat, looking for a kitty, gonna look in every corner of the city. Till I'm wheezing like a bus stop, running up the stairs, gonna meet you on the rooftop. But at night it's a different world. Go out and find a girl. Come on and dance all night. Despite the heat, it'll be alright. And babe, don't you know it's a pity the days can't be like the nights in the summer, in the city, in the summer, in the city.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you might join us from. There are a lot of different ways that folks are going to be here. This is our Back2BU campus our campus welcome back, I guess, but Q&A, and we're focused on the undergraduate campus guide. And so what we're going to do is we are going to get to the spirit of your questions. And I would say if you have questions along the way, go into the Q&A and put your questions in there. There'll be a lot of questions that'll get asked over again, and we're going to do our best to try and answer those questions. I've got some colleagues that'll also be in the Q&A that'll try to answer some of those questions for you as well. And we'll also pull a few panelists onto this Zoom so that you can also ask questions and we'll have them answer those for you. This is the session that's 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we particularly put a focus on students from the Questrom School of Business. We have another one of these coming up on the 20th of July at 8 a.m. and also at 8 p.m. The 8 a.m. 20th of July session and real focus on engineering students, and the 8 p.m. session on the 20th of July focuses in on communication students. Anyone can join any of those at any time, but we will have colleagues from the respective schools and colleges that'll be a part of those. What I'd like to do is just give you a few bits of introductory remarks, and then what I'm going to do is bring my colleagues into the space and start to answer your questions directly. As I said, it would be best for us if you use the Q&A function as a way to ask your questions. So it is important for me to also give a shout out, if you will, or a thank you to the student government for also co-sponsoring these with us and working with us in putting these together. We want to provide an environment that enables you to learn and live here. And this has to be a safe place amidst a global pandemic or a public health emergency. It's going on right now, and we've got to make sure that we can do all of that. Like you and many institutions out there, we're going to be guided at Boston University by public health advice and also government directives. And by government directives, I'm talking especially about the Massachusetts and also City of Boston directives that we receive. Now, you're going to hear in some of your responses to your questions, lots of rules and practices, lots of planning, lots of requirements and expectations. You'll get guidance and you'll get advice for the fall, all for the fall. And you should really understand that that advice and those practices and those rules that you get may be updated and they might be revised as we receive additional health and government guidance and direction. So that's really important. Now, let me give you a sense of some of the expectations that'll be in place for the fall. We've had to put in place many new health and safety procedures to help mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and to support the well-being of students in the community and our faculty and our staff. Now, while these are described in detail in www.bu.edu/back2 with the number 2BU, I want to give you a sense and a summary of a few of them so that you understand what we'll clearly expect for our students in the fall. So I'll say this, as a student who will visit or live on the campus this fall, it's important that we all play a critical role in trying to make sure that we minimize the transmission of COVID-19 within the community. And when you return to campus, here are a few things that we're going to expect that you do. We're going to ask students to follow all university requirements, including wearing a face covering or a face mask, to physically distance, and also to hand wash and to sanitize as appropriate. We're going to ask students to complete a symptom attestation through the Patient Connect every day prior to coming to campus, if you live off campus, or if you're a resident on campus before you leave your room. If you report positive symptoms, you're going to be expected to respond to the Boston University medical professional who will contact you for follow-up, including following any instructions that they may give you regarding testing for COVID-19. And if you are required to undergo testing as a result of reporting positive symptoms, you'll be expected to remain at your residence and minimize contact with others until a negative test result is obtained. Scheduled testing and reporting to an on-campus BU testing site for asymptomatic surveillance testing will be based on an assigned test frequency that you'll get. You'll get information about that. If you're informed by BU medical professionals or by your own primary care provider that you have a positive result for some sort of symptomatic or asymptomatic testing, and you live off campus, you'll be expected to isolate yourself in your residence. And if you live in on-campus housing, you'll be moved to an isolation housing and will have to isolate there. And in order to leave isolation and return to campus, you've got to be fever-free and symptom-free for 72 hours without medication. And 10 days have to have elapsed from the onset of those symptoms if you've had them. If the university determines that you are a close contact of someone or another individual at the university community who's tested positive, you'll be expected to follow the university's directive to quarantine for 14 days. And if you live in on-campus housing, you'll be moved to quarantine housing and you'll quarantine there. And if you live in off-campus housing, you'll be expected to quarantine at your residence for 14 days. And again, please understand that all of what I just mentioned to you is based upon public health circumstances, and university guidance and protocols will likely change. I'm noticing that with so many things since March, and sometimes that change happens abruptly. And what we've got to make sure of is that we keep each other informed, you keep yourself informed, and follow this guidance and protocol. Now, I hate to do this or say this, but if you can't follow these sorts of things, then we can't have you on the campus. We've got to have faculty and staff and students who follow along with these sorts of directives that we've received in order to be here and be in this space. We've got to keep ourselves healthy and safe. And by doing that, we keep each other that way too. And it runs right around in a full circle. So those are some introductory pieces. What I'd like to do now is to pull into this space some of my colleagues from around the university, and we will start to take your questions and answer your questions. So if we can go ahead and start to put everybody in. Fantastic. Why don't I have them introduce themselves? Sue, let's start with you, please.
Hi, I'm Sue Kennedy. I'm the Interim Associate Provost for Undergraduate Affairs, and I work with all the schools and colleges, including Questrom, on the undergraduate programs.
Fantastic. Good to see you. Peter, how about you go next?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Peter Smokowski. I'm the Vice President for Auxiliary Services, and in that role, I oversee housing, dining, events and conferences, fitness and recreation, and a number of other areas. Good to be with you today.
You too. Dr. Platt.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Judy Platt. I'm the Director of Student Health Services here at BU.
I think I will go because Ken seems to have disappeared. Frederick Brunel. I am the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs in Questrom. Welcome back, Ken.
Hey, yeah, thanks. Technology here. I'm doing the same thing you're doing there. All right, so why don't we begin? Let's see, the first set of questions I get, Peter, let's go with you. Big questions here about move-in. Tell us a little bit about how move-in's going to work.
Well, we've extended move-in. It covers 17 days, beginning on August 15th, and we'll run through August 31st. And obviously, if you have a travel restriction or an issue and you need to arrive a few days later, we will, of course, accommodate you. So move-in's is very structured. On July 15th, we opened up a scheduling system on the BU Housing portal where students can go in and pick either a morning slot from 8 a.m. to 12 or an afternoon slot from 1 to 5. And those slots are limited to 370 students per morning and afternoon. And we've done that intentionally to make sure that we can have a very slow scale and ramp up in housing, that we can reduce the crowding. Any crowding. And to give you an example of what that'll look like, if you're moving into 10 Buick Street and you have selected August 15th as a date, and that date was available, from 9 to noon, from 8 to noon, you will be joined by 40 other people. So essentially, Buick Street, which houses 860 students in private apartments with private bedrooms, only 40 people would be in that space moving in during that time slot, and then it would repeat again in the afternoon. And that's been done across the campus, across all 150 plus residences, and it just keeps everyone spread, and it allows us to slowly scale up in the fall.
And Dr. Platt, when folks get here, will they have to test or be tested?
So yes, as students are moving in, they will be tested, and that's part of our entry testing, which is another reason why, to Peter's point, we've really de-densified and spread out the move-in process, because we know there's a lot to do. Hopefully, people will pack as minimally as possible and just bring the things that you need, but you've got to move in, get into your room, and then also complete testing, which will be done as part of the move-in process.
So let's stick with you, Dr. Platt. Of course, lots of people are saying, what's the deal on me quarantining when I get to the campus? Do I have to do it? How's this going to work?
So quarantine has really been the hot topic. And I think it's one of those things, Dean Elmore, that as you pointed to, where there has been the most change. There are certain things that have stayed pretty constant throughout the pandemic in terms of health advice, but quarantine and quarantine recommendations have changed. So I think the most important thing to recognize is, one, there needs to be some flexibility around this, but two, we know people need to make plans. So currently in Massachusetts, the guidance is for anyone coming from states outside of the New England corridor and New York and New Jersey, that they self-quarantine for a period of 14 days. And we are still going to encourage people to do that. And self-quarantine really is about minimizing contact with others to the extent that you can possibly, and really only going out of your room or going out of an off-campus residence if you need to get food or if you need to get medical supplies. So the quarantine will still be in place. I guess the easy answer is yes, people will need to quarantine, but it won't necessarily involve, for travel-related quarantine, it won't involve you moving into a spot where you are only able to be in that spot and do not leave for the entire 14-day duration. We'll need people to follow all those individual health practices that are really important for preventing the spread of transmission, whether you're on campus or off campus. So I want to make a point that is for travel related quarantine. We have to be practical about this because we know that there are thousands of students coming back to campus, and not just here at BU, but at other campuses as well. If you are required to be in quarantine because you are a close contact, that is an actual risk as opposed to a theoretical risk that exists with travel related quarantine. So if you're determined to be a close contact of someone who is tested positive, again, the student health services healthcare professionals will reach out to you, explain what that means, and then guide you through that process. If you're an on-campus student, it will mean moving you to designated quarantine housing. If you're an off-campus student, it'll be giving you information about how you can quarantine to the best of your ability if you might be in a shared space.
And Judy, that works for a student whether they're international or not.
That's right.
So we've got a few academic questions. Sue, folks are asking as to whether or not we plan on making any changes to the academic calendar to accommodate this COVID.
Thanks so much for asking. There have been a lot of discussions actually about the academic calendar, and a lot of institutions are doing different things. We have explored different options. At this point, I believe there will be an announcement coming out very soon. For right now, the current academic calendar beginning September 2nd, last day of classes December 10th, is in place. So that is what we are going with for right now, and you will be kept apprised if there are any changes from that.
Thank you. And Frederick, folks are asking, when are we going to know, well, there are two questions. When are we going to know which classes are online, which are in person? And then how are we going to deal with core?
I was muted, I apologize. Two big questions. Thank you for asking them. The first question is regarding the classes that will be remote versus following the learning from anywhere protocol. We do not have yet the final count, but based on everything so far, the best estimate is the vast majority or almost all classes will follow the Learn from Anywhere protocol. The classes that will be 100% online will be a minority of courses. So far, we have made decision to put online only, remote only, some classes focusing on executive skills, on careers, because we felt there was no reason to bring students in the classroom for these classes that don't meet very often, that don't carry credits or that type of thing. Regarding core, we expect core to run as usual. However, obviously with it being adapted to the reality of this fall, we expect that students will be in the classroom and also accessing remotely. And we have a core section that starts at all different times of day. So we have an early morning, a midday, and a late afternoon section. So we are inviting students who are planning on not being able to travel back to campus to maybe try to see if they can make sure that they are scheduled for a time that allows them to access remotely in a synchronous fashion across time zones. But for that, we know we have a plenty of options. We have 9 different sections of core running this fall.
And I guess as a follow-on to this, and I think anybody can answer this, and maybe all of you might want to weigh in a little bit. With core and so many other collaborative kinds of courses, students are asking questions about whether or not there'll be opportunities for them in study groups. Will their study groups have to be remote? What about how we're treating common area spaces in Questrom around campus and our dining spaces and our residences around campus? How can we imagine that?
Peter, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, let me start with the dining halls, because I think that's always a good place to start. Everyone has to eat. And so I know our team, our culinary team, our chefs in particular, have been working very hard through the summer. We always work to review the menus, looking at student surveys and input to revise those menus. So we've been hard at work. You can expect a very robust dining experience, not dissimilar to the ones that students enjoyed this past fall. I mean, obviously, we've had to make some changes. I've seen some rumors and, you know, just a little bit of comment that everything we're going to be doing is a meal in a box. That's really not the case. While we have moved to disposable ware, both in terms of packaging and silverware, we had to. I think, you know, just from a safety perspective, self-serve and reusing of utensils and plates is probably not where we need to be. So everything will be served in takeout containers and disposable serviceware. The dining halls, the seating capacity will be reduced. There will be seating available for singles, and then there will be singles seating available for households. So, you know, I'm sure we're going to get into the household concept as part of this conversation this afternoon. But if you live in a household and your household is 4 or 5 students, there will be opportunities for you to dine together as part of your household in the dining halls. But again, that seating will be limited, lots of grab and go and takeout options. And we are working with our facilities department for outdoor seating while the weather's good. And if you think about a traditional picnic table where there could be some outdoor seating, again, really watching our physical distancing and those kinds of scenarios, but creating all kinds of options for dining, both in the dining halls and then outside of the dining halls as well.
Now, Frederick, surely you're not going to put picnic tables in that beautiful atrium, are you? I mean, how are we going to deal with the need for students to get around each other, to talk to each other and to study and to do core group work?
So on this front, Ken, we've had a very robust set of activities, and they are ongoing. We have several groups in the school and the university looking at how we use and interface with our building. And we are still finalizing the details. I can probably share some general principle at this point, and I don't have all the exact detail, but it is safe to assume that our traditional team rooms, and we have a lot in Questrom of these team rooms, will not be available in the same way they were in the past. There is no way you're going to pack 6 or 8 people in a tiny team room. This is just not safe. This is not medical good practice. So that will not be happening. Engagement in the classroom also, people will not be clustering together in the classroom to do a team activity. In the classroom, we're going to have a subset of the students on any given day. On any given day, we will have maybe, you know, a third of the student or 20% or whatever number it is, I don't know what it is, 15% that have chosen to only access remotely. Maybe they couldn't travel back to Boston, or maybe they are compromised on a health perspective. So these people will be interfacing remotely. And then the rest of the students will be in a rotation where they go maybe every other class. So on any given day, we will have the team will be made up of what? Student in Boston in class, student in Boston not in class, and student located elsewhere in the world. And therefore, when you think about teams distributed in this fashion, there is only one way these teams can work together. They work together through technology, through Zoom, through MS Teams. And, in many ways, this represents the reality of teams around the world in businesses. So this is, the COVID crisis is forcing upon us the reality of teaming in the modern global age, where you work with distributed workforce all around the world, and our core teams are going to do just that.
And I think everybody on this Zoom will say we have had a lot of practice doing that.
Yeah.
Precisely what you've described.
Yes. And I think all of us are,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No, all of us, and including students this spring. And we ran core in the spring, half in person, half online. And it was a very fulfilling experience.
And Dr. Platt, I would imagine that students who are collaborating with each other, if they're doing it in public spaces like the atrium or in the GSU or in spaces available for them in residences, they should be wearing face coverings or masks too, right?
Absolutely, Dean Elmore. I think, there's been a lot of medical literature and even more literature coming out about the importance of facial coverings or wearing a mask. And I think we know it's just one of those public health practices that really can prevent the transmission of the virus. So even if you're in a group that is, being physically distanced, putting on, keeping your facial covering on, that's, there's a state mandate for facial coverings to be worn in Massachusetts. And then on BU, there's an expectation that people will wear them in all places, even public places on campus, so that you're always taking public health steps to protect yourself and protect others.
And Dr. Platt, while we've got you, there have been a few questions about whether or not insurance covers some of the things that you've been talking about by way of quarantining, testing, medical care and case management. And then someone's also asked, what about waiving insurance? And I guess SHIP is what they specifically mentioned.
Great, so that's a really important question. So speaking on behalf of all insurance carriers, which is always a dangerous thing to do as a healthcare provider, but I think there has been a lot of work done to ensure that any type of health insurance will provide coverage for COVID-related testing or medical care. Speaking more specifically about the student health insurance plan, the student health insurance plan also provides coverage for testing that is medically authorized, as well as COVID-related care, if that might be in an outpatient setting or even in a hospital setting. If students have insurance that is comparable, meaning it meets all of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act recommendations, then students are able to waive the student health insurance plan. We enroll all students and charge students for the student health insurance plan because we know it exceeds the Affordable Care Act requirements, and also not only covers students in the Boston area, but covers them in this country and also covers them internationally. So it's a good comprehensive plan to have, and it's not just important if you're going to be here on campus. However, if students choose to waive, they can do so, and that is through the student link, as it always had been. But again, if you're waiving the plan, you may need to provide some additional information if you're going to be studying from abroad, so that we have that information and can guide you in the best way. The student health insurance guide is on our Student Health Services webpage. It's really a helpful guide to think through these scenarios. Now, when we talk specifically about some of the case management and quarantine and isolation, so those are things that don't necessarily involve medical care outside of what Student Health Services is doing. So that's all covered in the Student Health and Wellness fee. That's not something that you would use your insurance for necessarily. When we think about testing, there's really two forms of testing. There's testing if you have symptoms, and that is the medically authorized testing that all insurance carriers cover. And then there is the type of testing that BU is doing to mitigate risk on our campus for a major outbreak. And that is surveillance testing or asymptomatic testing. And that's a really important distinction because health insurances broadly are not covering that type of surveillance testing, but BU will be covering that cost. So when students are required to get testing, that is something that BU is covering and will not be something that you'll be required to use your health insurance for.
So there are a few questions out there as to whether how a student does engage the LFA process. How do they let someone know how they're doing that and whether they're going to do that?
Thanks for asking. Well, we hope, first of all, that you responded to the survey that was sent out. I believe that was last week. We've had quite a response. About 60% of our undergraduates responded to that. So that would be one way. And then we will have, and there are some discussions about different ways to do this, in some likelihood, an indicator that will be available so students can indicate whether or not they are on campus and whether or not they are taking their classes in person on the rotational basis, or whether they are taking their courses remotely.
Thank you. Peter, you mentioned earlier the idea about households, and we've got a few people wondering a little bit more about that, as well as whether or not we've de-densified our spaces to accommodate that. Can you and Dr. Platt talk a little bit about that?
Sure, Judy. I'll just start with the density reductions that we've taken, and then maybe just talk a little bit about the households. So density, if all quads, so those are rooms with 4 beds, and all triples, those are rooms with 3 beds, have been reduced to doubles, with one exception, Hojo's 575 Com Ave. That remains as triples, and largely because the 3 students sharing that room have a private bathroom. So those ratios are low and acceptable. So the density has been reduced, and those beds are gone. When you think about households, and I think the simplest way, let's go back to Hojo's for a minute. A household at Howard Johnson's, the former Howard Johnson's, would be those 3 people. They would, just like they would do during a normal semester, they'd schedule their bathroom use, and if we moved over to 33 Aganis Way, if you were in an 8-person suite, that would represent your household. If we move to a traditional first-year accommodation like Wester Warren Towers, those floors are being broken down into components of 3, perhaps 4 households that will be comprised of anywhere from 12 to 15 students. Those students will work together in their group and with the other households on the floor to schedule daily hygiene visits in the bathrooms. And that's not to say if you need to use the bathroom, you use the bathroom. It's scheduling your normal hygiene visits during the course of the day so that we can keep the density in those bathrooms low. So that we'd want to schedule those visits around the number of private showers that are in each bathroom, and then access to the sinks. Those bathrooms will be outfitted with sanitation wipes. And we would just ask students in those common shared areas, wipe the areas down using the sanitation and cleaning supplies that we've provided. And then as you're leaving, wipe them down as you leave. Leave them the way that you would like to find them if you were going in for your daily visit. In residences where you have an in-suite bath, we will be providing each one of those units with a starter kit of sanitizing and cleaning materials. And as always, those students have always been responsible for maintaining and cleaning their own units, both their kitchens, their common and shared spaces, and their bathrooms.
Judy, anything you'd add to that?
I think that was a really thorough answer. I would just say that, we have, like many states, there is guidance based on the numbers of people for outdoor gatherings or indoor gatherings. And that's something that we have seen change with the phases of reopening in Massachusetts. But when we think about the de-densification that has occurred on campus, it's really about preserving ratios in classrooms and even in shared spaces that will still allow that minimum of 6 feet of distancing. So I think just keeping in mind, even if a gathering limit, let's talk about Massachusetts for a second, if the indoor gathering limit is 25, that doesn't mean that we need to have 25 people in an indoor space. We're still trying to preserve that 6 feet of physical distancing so that we minimize those chances of someone being a close contact. So guidance on that may change, but there won't be, I don't think, any plans to bring together large groups in an indoor space, even if guidance suggests that we could do that, because we're really trying to be thoughtful about how all the de-densifying efforts have been done leading up to the start of the fall semester.
Thank you. So I've been off screen and back because I had to go and get some people. We have a lot of questions about I-20s and F1 visas, and I had to go get Amanda Conley from the International Students and Scholars Office, pull her right into this space to answer a few questions. Amanda, could you just give us an overview? And as you can imagine, a lot of people have questions about their F1 visas and also about I-20s, also about whether or not there'll be extensions granted, and also the confusion, as I'm sure you're dealing with, about some of the recent administrative blustering and then backing off recently. So let me give you a chance to talk a little bit. You'll probably answer a lot of people's questions.
Sure, I will do my very best. I'll give sort of a high-level overview, and I know I am fully aware all of our international students have a zillion questions right now. And we have about like a quarter of a zillion answers right now. So in the ISSO, we are still trying to figure out, we are learning new things every single day about what the fall is going to look like, what travel is going to look like. So it's been a crazy couple of weeks for our international students because a lot has happened. For our continuing students, we were really, really fortunate in that we were given a lot of flexibility when we had to have everybody, have people move off campus, have people go home, have people get stuck outside of the country over spring break because of travel restrictions. So the Student and Exchange Visitor Program, SEVP, is the big agency that kind of controls what our international students can and can't do. They gave us a lot of flexibility for spring and summer. If you needed to take all of your classes remotely, no problem. If you couldn't stay enrolled full time because one of your classes got canceled, no problem, you were okay. So last week, they gave us some new guidance. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the big agency, gave us some new guidance that was much more restrictive. Court battles ensued, Harvard sued, MIT sued, BU got in on those lawsuits and said, this is really bad for our students, this is really bad for our schools. And thankfully, last Tuesday of this week, it feels like 5 years ago, but it was really just Tuesday of this week, they said that they were going to rescind that guidance and we're going back to what we got for spring and summer. Right now, that means that our continuing students, so students who have been enrolled at BU, will be okay. You're going to be okay to be enrolled remotely. The LFA modality works for you regardless of what you choose. Come to campus, do as much in person as you possibly can, stay in your home country if you need to. If you're safe with family in California and you need to do your classes remotely, you're going to be okay. We are still waiting on some updated guidance around our brand new students, how that's going to look for students who've never been enrolled at BU before for fall. And we're anticipating that they're going to give us some additional information about I-20s and SEVIS record maintenance. But for our continuing students, we do not believe we're going to have to terminate your SEVIS record if you're enrolled remotely for the fall. If you need a new travel signature, we have very specific instructions on the ISSO website on how to request an updated travel signature on your I-20. We're hearing some good things about embassies and consulates around the world starting to open up. So for our students who do need to go get new visa stamps, we're hearing that those appointments are starting to become available. You're going to want to check the embassy or consulate website where you would apply. And we're hearing that there is potential that travel from the Schengen countries, the UK and Ireland is going to start opening up Our students are very engaged in this. We're waiting on confirmation from Customs and Border Protection, from the folks at the airport, that they're actually going to let you in if you get on a plane to come here, and we don't have that yet. So there's still a lot of unknowns, but we're hearing some really positive things in terms of many of our students who want to return to BU for the fall should be able to. And those of you who can't, who have been enrolled at BU previously, your immigration status should be safe for the fall semester.
Lots of stuff there, Amanda.
Yeah.
Stick around. I'm sure there's some more
It's been
questions
a whirlwind
we can
for
get to.
us and for our students. So
I bet. I've got a few that I want to throw out there, and I think this is more for you, Sue, and you, Frederick. So we've got a few students who are asking, if I want to take classes in person, I've got a number of classes that are 25 people or less. Can I count on this being an in-person experience?
That's a great question. And the answer is, it depends. There are a lot of things that classrooms are going to look different. A lot of our spaces on campus are going to look different. Your classrooms are going to look different because we are employing best public health practices, and that requires 6-foot physical distancing. So there will be fewer students in your classrooms. So the amount of time you have in classroom is dependent upon the enrollment of the class, the classroom space, and we're trying to work on that to make sure that students are able to get into the classrooms as much as possible. And so there's a little bit of movement in terms of moving classrooms from perhaps their original assignment. The other part of that is that there may be some courses that move to a remote instruction because the instructor is unable to teach in person. And Frederick, I don't know if you had anything you would like to add to that.
I'll give maybe a little more specificities if I can. I think you should realize that we have new adjusted capacities for every classroom in Questrom. And by and large, these capacities range from the low teens or just about, maybe a dozen or so to high teens number. I think the largest capacity for a regular classroom in Questrom is 20 people for the fall. So irrespective, of the size of the class, even a class of 25 students will not be able to meet all at once. So this is why every class pretty much will have some form of rotation if it's an LFA class, unless it's 100% remote class. But again, like I said, at this point, we do not have any significant number of remote-only classes for Questrom. This will change a little bit because we are in the process of reviewing medical type exceptions for some faculty members who are in high-risk group. And so once this is documented and adjudicated, we will have a few more classes probably that will be only remote based on these requests.
So this is a bit of a what if question, I guess, but there's a little bit of this I see. This is from a Questrom sophomore in particular, planning to take 18 credits and wanted to know if they chose to study remotely, would they still be able to get that done?
I will take that question, or Sue, if you want it. I don't know who was going to. The answer is I would expect yes. I would expect yes, unless there is a major conflict in the schedule that was chosen, but if they haven't registered for classes that meet at the same time and are able to handle the workload, they will be able to fulfill their class.
And I think I know the answer to this question-wise, but I'll let you go at it. And it looks like it's got some real push here. Will the Starbucks, the library, UDC, et cetera, will those all be available and open?
Well, I'll take the Starbucks question. The answer is yes. We're still looking at what, if any, seating will be available. That is a very busy, very small space adjacent to Breadwinners. So if again, I think, Ken, you mentioned the guide at the beginning. If you take a look at the guide, you will see that most of the retail locations are going to be moving to mobile ordering for pickup. So you can imagine a Starbucks where you will order ahead of time. And we are going to ask everyone to do those orders ahead of time mobile. There'll be no additional cost to the student for using a Grubhub app in order to do that. And then you will be going to that location to pick up. So it will be grab and go. It will still be the full Starbucks menu, but it will be organized in a way where you will go in through, as you know, there are 2 double doors there. You will go in through one door, identify yourself, pick up your order. And then again, if there's limited seating, we haven't quite worked that out yet, that may be available. For the most part though, you will be taking that order and leaving the space.
Frederick, anything you'd add?
I would add that being masked in the building is the expectation, and therefore you should adjust your meals and those type of issues to not schedule them in the building. It's okay to grab a drink with a straw so you can drink below your mask. But in general, the good health practice would be to reserve that in a space where you can demask.
Thank you. Dr. Platt, we've got a few students who live off campus and they're asking, will they get tested and should they get tested before attending classes? And how might they go about that?
So I think, let me answer the first question. Will off-campus students be tested as well as on-campus students? The answer is yes. In terms of the question, should I get tested before coming to campus or before coming to class or before moving in? I would suggest that if you are having symptoms, and this is something that we're calling on the whole world to do, right? Monitor yourself for symptoms. If you have symptoms, reach out to a healthcare professional before coming to campus and get tested if you have symptoms. But the asymptomatic or surveillance testing that BU is incorporating into our risk mitigation efforts as we come back to the campus is not something that is readily covered by insurance companies. In fact, most insurance companies do not cover that sort of testing. So I would say that that may not be a reality that people are actually able to get testing. And so I would encourage people to feel comfortable and be ready to adhere to the testing frequency that will be established here on BU's campus, but not to feel as if you have to have testing done before you come to campus, unless you have symptoms. If you're sick, if you're not feeling well, if you have symptoms, please talk to a healthcare provider before coming to campus.
So I've got a few questions about the ability for students to move freely around campus and also to have people visit them from off campus. What do you suggest, Dr. Platt?
Well, in terms of being able to move freely around campus, which we know is important. I mean, part of why we're bringing back this residential campus, knowing that if you're in a room with someone else, you're not going to be physically distancing at all times, is because we know that the importance of human interaction is really vital for all of us. But particularly for our students as well. So I think to move around freely on campus is really something that we all have to think about as a shared responsibility. If we are doing our best to adhere to the guidance put in place at BU, which involves signage about, minimizing use in elevators, taking the stairs, de-densifying areas. If we follow those directions and guidance, if we all wear face coverings, and if we do our best to keep the risk of transmission down, then we're all able to move around campus more freely. So I think it's really around everyone recognizing that that's our responsibility. And it's not just the students, it's the same, this is the whole community. We all have to be in this together. We all have to adhere to these individual health practices, wearing a facial covering, minimizing interactions when you can, washing your hands frequently, and then reaching out when you do your symptom attestation. Make sure that if you're having symptoms, you let someone know. In the same way that if you had the flu, we won't want you to come into a classroom. It's the same way going into COVID as well. I think if we all do that, we have the best chances of being able not just to move around campus freely or with more freedom, but to feel safe doing it.
Thank you. I just brought in Julie Wickstrom. She oversees financial aid here at the university. And Julie, hi.
Hi, Ken.
Great. Hello. We've got a few questions about financial aid, and I'm going to try and put them together a little bit. Students are concerned about whether or not they can keep their financial aid if they can't come back in the fall due maybe to some high-risk health concerns.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to answer some questions, Ken. Students, a couple things I want to make sure are clear, that regardless of where students are studying, if they're 100% remote or on campus or living off campus, you're still eligible for financial aid. And we have great resources on our website to help you figure out how your aid might change if your costs change. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at the website. If you have changes related to COVID or other financial circumstances, we definitely want to hear from you. So definitely be in touch with us so that we can make sure that we know what's going on with you and your family. And there may be other options to increase your financial aid to help with that.
Great. And are there any other, it looks like folks are concerned too about any restrictions about numbers of courses or variations in courses as also affecting financial aid?
Right. So we still require students to be full-time to receive their financial aid. Other than that, it doesn't matter to us if you're, again, 100% remote or not. I do want to also point out that we waived the requirement for full tuition scholarship recipients to live on campus. So you can stay home if you're feeling like that's the best option for you and be 100% remote and still receive your financial aid. Again, the costs are a little bit different, so definitely visit our website or contact us to find out how that might affect us. We also have a way that you and your students can schedule meetings to talk with us via Zoom if you're worried about your individual circumstance.
Great. Peter, folks are asking whether or not there are additional costs for coming in early and needing to quarantine.
No.
Okay, simple. I'm going to ask this question as we're starting to get to the end here, but there are plenty of questions where people are asking how we're going to enforce some of the things that I mentioned at the very beginning. Enforce the circumstance where a student maybe does not want to wear a mask. Enforce situations where a student may not fulfill their obligations for testing or attesting to their physical condition. How are we going to enforce that? And I certainly will add on, but I wonder if, Judy, if you've got any thoughts about enforcing this and about us complying with this stuff.
So I think the first thing that I would say is, compliance, which is really about everyone, doing the things that we need people to do from a public health perspective, and then enforcement of that compliance are slightly different. And I think that word enforcement can mean different things to different people. But I would say that this is regardless of, what your personal experience has been during this time, or what a political view may be. This is about a public health crisis, and this is about addressing that. So these measures are put into place because with the evidence that we have, facial coverings, good attention to hand hygiene, and physical distancing are the tools that we all have at our disposal to be able to, help sort of move the needle on this battle and be able to bring our campus back safely. So I think the first step is about how do we make sure that everyone has the information that they need and the knowledge that they need to understand that this is the best way to go about being able to bring this campus back. And I think if you have, very serious concerns about, well, who's going to make sure that I'm doing this, then I would say, maybe it's not best not to be in part of a residential campus, because we need people to understand that these are all things, Dean Elmore started with the expectations that we have. These are all things that we need to do. So if it doesn't sit right with you, if you don't agree with it, that's fine. But I would say then perhaps consider not being on campus, because this is something that we're really doing as a shared campus. There's been a lot of conversation about enforcement and how we can do this. I think I'll speak on behalf of my personal opinion, but I think recognizing the university's perspective as well, we know this has been tremendously hard for our students. It's been tremendously hard for everyone as well. We're not looking to add in layers to make it any more difficult for you to do what you actually need to do, but we are committing to bringing people back to an environment where risks are mitigated. So you'll hear more about how enforcement will work in the coming weeks. One piece that's in the Back2BU guide talks about a web-based process for all of the students who are returning students, and even for those students who will be coming to campus. Patient Connect is one of the first interactions that you have with student health services. It's where you upload your immunization forms. It's where you can speak to healthcare professionals, and it's how we're going to be reaching out to you about scheduling your tests and providing support and education if you find yourself in need of quarantine or isolation. So I think that is one place where we need to be, focusing our efforts and getting questions answered so that we're not in a situation where people are running around dealing with enforcement, because we want to be here supporting you in your academic goals.
So right, Judy, and I'm going to second that. I have been in rooms, and people will tell you, where I have defended you as students as being able to do the right thing because you want to be here. And I think you are adult enough to know that if you take care of other people, you take care of yourself. And when you take care of yourself, you take care of other people. And that you want to be here, and that you don't want us in a situation where we've got to shut back down again. And that extends to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as well. There's a culture in this state right now where we are high about testing, about managing this, about quarantining if we need to, about making sure that we cover our faces so that we don't spread it. And I noticed that there are a couple of people asking why cover and do physical distancing. Well, because that's what the facts and the science tell us is most effective about doing this. And here on campus and here in the Commonwealth, we've done well by that. I hope that the inherent conflicts that come from people forgetting to pull up their face coverings or from people being a little too close to each other are the kinds of things that we deal with each other. Simply to say, give yourselves a little more room. Please pull up your mask after you do your face recognition. Make sure you're wearing your mask in class. It protects us all. Let's not sit next to each other in places where we know we're not supposed to, or move furniture around from the settings that they've been moored to. Let's be sure that we use the bathroom and the sink that we've been asked to use and to wipe it down. Those are the kinds of small things that we observe each other, and we've got to hold each other accountable for. I have to be engaged with holding you accountable if you're refusing to take your test, as we define them for you, the frequency for you. I've got to be responsible and hold you accountable if you don't do the daily attestation, whether you live on campus or off campus. And I hate to get to a point where I've got to ask you to leave campus because of that, but that will be my responsibility, is to ask you to leave campus. That will be the enforcement that we'll do. We'll have to be swift about it, and we have to be very firm about it. And I think we're being fair by letting you know up front that these are the non-negotiables. And so I think all of that together is how we enforce this. And I don't look at it as an enforcement as much as I look at this as taking care of each other and taking care of this community so we can continue to live here, learn here, and still come to know each other and interact with each other. So that's really important. We all have a role in making sure that we comply with what's going on. And the university also has done a lot by way of subtle things to make sure that you've got the infrastructure to support your being here. Now, I brought John Battolino from Student Activities in because there are a number of questions people have about clubs, organizations, their ability to meet. Are we gonna have activities here, John? Or are we just in our room the whole time for 8 weeks? What's going on?
Dina, I've been answering some of the specific questions in the Q&A area, but essentially we're looking at returning students wanting to know what the new normal is, and then of course new students want to find out, what am I walking into? And I really appreciate what you just said, Dean Elmore, regarding taking care of one another and watching out for one another, because that's where our student leaders, our returning students, are going to be able to keep their crew together, their clubs and organizations, and we'll certainly encourage them to stay together. respecting, of course, the capacity limitations and the safety protocols that are going to be in place this year, but we are going to encourage activity. Students are looking forward to coming back to campus, and we are looking forward to having them for sure. And for our new students, again, Ken, we're going to continue with our traditional programs, weeks of welcome programs, to allow our new students to meet returning students, to make friends, to get to know one another, to have conversation like we always do. And some of those delivery options will be in person, simultaneously offered to those folks remotely. Again, understanding all of the safety protocols and capacity issues. But yes, 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 plenty of activity on campus, Dean Elmore.
Well, thank you. So we're coming to the end of this. So I'm going to kick you all out, and I'm going to bring in our representative from student government. Thank you all for your time. And I'm bringing in our representative of student government to do a couple of things. First off, to thank them for pushing us to make this happen and to make it happen so often. And what's more, there is a new normal challenge that I want them to talk a little bit about. Let's see if we can get them on here with me. Give us one moment.
Hello, Daniel.
There he is, Oliver. Oliver Poor is president of your student government. Oliver, thank you for making us come together and making this happen. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And tell us a little bit about the new normal challenge. I think this is really exciting.
Absolutely. So COVID-19 has obviously turned our world upside down. This year, it has required us to sacrifice and adjust our own lives as we figure out what the new normal is. BU is committed to having students back on campus this fall, as well as providing remote learning and engagement opportunities. But the global pandemic will continue to impact our lives for the foreseeable future, whether we're physically on or off campus. This summer, BU Student Government, Umoja the Black Student Union, the Dean of Students Office, and Innovate at BU are partnering to host the New Normal Challenge. This will be an opportunity for undergraduate students to embrace the entrepreneurial mindset and focus on developing recommendations, interventions, new events, or traditions, and so much more that will help the BU community begin to heal and reconnect while we transition to a hybrid community this fall. What I want to emphasize is that, yes, it's going to be a different year, but that is not going to be any excuse to let the community not connect as much as we should. The BU community should continue to connect, continue to work together, and continue to collaborate and to continue working as one, because we are one community. For more information, check out the Innovate at BU website, and please follow BU Student Gov on Instagram to stay up to date with what BU Student Government is up to. More information will be out about the New Normal Challenge in the upcoming days. So we're super excited, and I really hope to see that you participate in, continuing to strengthen the community.
Thanks, Oliver. And we'll put a slide up right after this, and we'll keep it up so that folks can see that. All right. So as I mentioned, we spent about an hour. We've got 8 more of these that are planned that we will give some information out on. Our next one, or next ones, are on July 20th. And we'll have one at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. The 8 a.m. one will be particularly focused on College of Engineering, and the 8 p.m. one will be with a particular focus on the College of Communication. We know that we could not get to every specific question, but I tried really hard to try and group them together and get to the spirit of those questions. You're more than welcome to come and join other sessions, and you certainly can call the offices that were referenced throughout. We'll keep the chat and the we'll keep the Q&A alive for a little bit, so that my colleagues who might be out there can continue to answer some of your questions. And as I said, we'll do our best to answer all of your questions, but we may not be able to get to all of them. Appreciate you spending some time. Thank you very much. Be safe and stay healthy.